Police officers who have arrested other police officers. What's the story? My dad was the arresting officer of an undercover narcotics detective for the murder of 2 fellow officers. From what I remember, the 2 officers and a technician caught him by surprise while he was stealing from an evidence room. He shot the 2 officers first and his firearm jammed, so the technician escaped. Detective got life in prison and died there. What was his plan? Even if he killed the 3rd guy, they would still know who did it. It's not like he would have gotten away. Easier to sprinkle something on them when you do it inside the evidence locker, though. Yeah, I caught these 3 red-handed with, 4 grenades, 30 kilos of blow and 4 dozen rape kits. He panicked and the reptile part of his brain took over decision-making for him. A lizard brain, great for dealing with problems, terrible for the consequences. What sort of evidence was he trying to steal? Not sure what he was taking at the time, but he had a good amount of guns at his home that had stolen. Wow, what a scary story. Glad justice was served. How did 22 guns go missing from an evidence room? Was it after 20 went missing they finally made someone look at the CCTV and investigate it? If the guns are part of a large case, it can sometimes take years for the case to go to trial. Until then, everyone just assumed the evidence is all sitting there waiting for the trial. Unless there's an audit, no one will find out for ages. And even then, people will at first assume things are misfiled or lost. Probationary officer goes on a blind double date with his roommate. Been at the racetrack drinking, so they take the train to downtown. Everyone is pretty drunk, him in particular. Maybe to entertain or show off for his date, he is acting goofy. As everyone is getting off the train, he sees some guy bent over tying his shoes. Rocket scientist decides to leapfrog over the guy, only neither of them have much balance. Probationary cop basically jumps over/in the guy and drives his face straight into the pavement because he is too drunk and the guy wasn't expecting it. Everyone jumps up and he starts trying to defuse the situation he just caused. Turns out the guy is a 17-year-old kid heading down to spend the weekend with his grandparents and has 2 broken teeth and a broken nose. The drunk cop starts saying stuff like, "It's okay, it will be fine, I'm a cop, and it's all good." When he realizes the crowd isn't going to let him just walk away, he foot bails and tries to run off. A few guys chase him down and grab him. Cops get called and detain him. I was the on-call detective who was called out at 2230 to handle the case. He refused to answer any questions and was booked in for felony battery, based on the extent of injuries and age of victim. He never made it off probation and resigned. Edit. Since I saw this asked, I figured I would clarify. I wrote up and submitted the packet to the DA for prosecution. Nothing was swept under the rug. Trust me, a guy like this is not wanted on the police department. He was a probationary officer, so it would be easier to terminate him. The case was put through the system by the DA and he ultimately took a plea deal. A plea deal is very common across the entire spectrum of cases, whether it be a vandalism, theft of $1 billion, drug charges or murder. It is probably the most commonly used tool for adjudicating cases, so don't think a plea deal was arranged because he had been a cop. Remember, he was arrested and charged by the same department he was a probationary officer for. What a effing idiot. Alcohol is a hell of a drug. The guys who chased him down and grabbed him are the real champs. 100%, don't watch someone get their crap rocked and let the aggressor go free. I watched a guy stumble out of a bar from across the street once, looked like he was plastered and on a different planet. A second later, a bouncer comes charging out and smashes the back of the guy's head, causing him to dead drop face first, busted out like 4 teeth instantly and his face was all effed up. I told my wife to call the cops and I walked over and kept telling them to not touch him. Bouncer wanted to keep giving him shots after he hit the deck, despite the guy clearly not looking to fight back. Turns out he had drunkenly fallen over inside the bar, broke a bunch of chairs and spilled a bunch of drinks, so the bouncers grabbed him and literally tossed him through the doors. The guy was so disoriented he didn't know where to go. He just stood there and then the bouncers screamed at him to leave, then immediately just bashed the back of his head. When the cops showed up, the bouncer and other bar staff immediately tried to lie. I walked to the side of the building with one other officer and explained exactly what I saw and knew clearly. I wasn't drinking and it was very obviously the bouncer assaulting this guy that caused the injury. I ended up giving another statement over the phone about a month later. The drunk guy ended up taking the bar to court over all the damages, injury, loss of work, trauma, etc. Believe it all ended up in the bouncer getting probation. The bar paid the guy a crap load of money and the drunk guy lost his job too but got 4 shiny new fake teeth. Wow, that's crazy. You're a brave person for getting involved. You pretty much saved that guy's life because the cops would have believed the bouncers if you weren't there. That not only hurts to hear but it's just sad losing 2 teeth, which cannot grow back. He'll spend the rest of his life like that. What's worse is it's starting at 17. They have false teeth you can get, they look pretty close to the real thing. Of course they probably don't feel the same but at least he's not going to just have a hole in his mouth. Edit. Apparently they do feel exactly the same. Modern medicine is amazing. Having lost my upper front tooth playing basketball and having a resin, I can tell you it feels pretty much like a normal tooth. Also it has lasted about 10 years without issue. It is just slightly thicker at the base compared to the other tooth right beside it. Not me, but my dad, who was a cop. He was still working as a full-time cop before switching full-time to firefighting and made a traffic stop around 11 at night back in the mid-80s. Nicer car, speeding well over the speed limit, so my dad initiates a stop. Before he is out of his cruiser, the driver has what looks like a badge hanging out of the window. My dad walks up, does the usual song and dance, and the driver said, "You obviously can't effing see who I am." My dad says, "Yes, Lieutenant Colonel, I do, and right now I'm conducting a traffic stop." Turns out the driver was a LT. Colonel in the Ohio State Highway Patrol, which is pretty high up in their rank structure. My dad again asks him for license and insurance and the guy goes off, threatening to call Dick, as in Dick Celeste, who was governor at the time, and threatening his job, that he was just trying to get back to Columbus after an engagement and so on. Eventually he calls for backup and has another officer there to witness what was going on. Eventually my dad writes him a ticket, and while still screaming, "Mr. Pulling Rank," drives away. The next shift my dad gets called in by his assistant chief and is asked about the stop, and apparently the colonel of OSHP was calling him about it. In the end they had to bring in the other officer to write a statement of what went on, and in the end nothing came of it, except the ticket wasn't contested and paid. More cops need to enforce speed limits on each other. It really pisses me off when I see cop cars speeding past me with no lights on when it's clear they aren't going on a call. They're just driving. It's much less common where I am now, Washington, than it was in the South, where I am from. When I got my motorcycle license, the Leo teaching the safety course repeatedly bragged about getting pulled over a few times per year doing over 100 miles per hour. Here in California that's a felony, an offense that can get your license revoked for 1 year, and simply flashing his badge and telling whoever made the stop to go deal with the real bad guys. It was a cringe-filled weekend to say the least. It also made me very wary of other motorcyclists. I'd been riding off-road all my life, but saw 2 classmates who had 0 riding experience at the beginning of the weekend, one of which cried when we had to do the lock your brakes to perform a stop exercise and laid the bike down in the final test, something that was said to be an automatic fail, pass the class, meaning that they wouldn't have to take a physical test at the DMV when getting their licenses. It was a real crap show. Edit. Wary and wrong about 100 miles per hour plus, being a felony. Cousin who was written up for 99 plus, was told by citing officer that if he would have written the actual speed then it would have been a felony that would have caused him to lose his license for a minimum of a year. Whoops. Like, they actually make you lock up your brakes, or are you just meaning this as an aggressive stop? Because that seems really stupid to make riders do. Locking up your brakes is basically guaranteeing like half your riders, beginner riders at that, lay the bike down. Speaking as a motorcyclist here, it's going from like 15 miles per hour to full stop. Anyone should be capable of that if they want to ride a motorcycle. It's a mandatory part of the driving test here, and I think hitting the brakes as hard as you can is a very important thing to do if you get on a new bike. Better to test the emergency system before there's an actual emergency. All modern bikes in Europe have ABS anyway, and most have some form of system to detect if the rear wheel is rising off the ground. But that's only been a requirement since 2015, and some people actively hate it. I think partially that's by design, as people tend to drive under the speed limit around cops, which can cause congestion. That said, Raleigh, NC did a special where they tailed speeding cops and found one of the worst offenders was the actual driving instructor. That kind of within the norms of speed isn't the type of speeding being referred to here, at least in my experience. It's the cop going 60 plus, in a 40 zone, no lights or siren. Or the ones that just blow through stop signs and red lights without even slowing down. Or the ones that are going 20 plus, over the limit on the shoulder, or crossing double yellow lines. Yeah, have at it when your lights are on, but it's bullcrap that they get away with reckless driving. Like the one from last year where the cop runs a stop sign, gets T-boned, and then arrests the guy, no charges. Or the one from a few years back where a distracted cop veered into a bike lane and killed a cyclist, no charges. Or the one where the cop runs head-on into a cyclist stopped at an intersection, no charges. Or the one where the cop absolutely plasters a woman in a parking lot, no charges. Or the one where the cop is actually on a call to find a woman who is laying down in a parking lot and folks call it in, worried she'll get run over, and then the cop runs over her, killing her. Can you guess? No charges. If any of us normies did the above, we'd have at least been arrested. YouTube link. Web link. I actually have had to arrest 3 separate members of the justice system this year. First, a practicing lawyer and former judge who had been utilizing his position to coerce sex from defendants. He utilized this leverage even after he was not a judge anymore. Investigation by DCI revealed he had about a dozen victims, so a warrant for his arrest was made, which I executed. Arresting a guy you used to put defendants in front of is a very odd feeling. He weaseled out of prison time and got it all suspended and put on a direct supervision probation program. Absolute horse crap. I've seen guys do way less get way more time, but it's not really a secret that money has a habit of tipping the scales of justice. Next was a prison guard whom strangled his girlfriend, then stalked her relentlessly. I actually arrested him twice because after he posted bail on the first one he was spotted lurking outside her home only 45 minutes after being released. He's currently in on felony assault, strangulation of a household member, and felony violation of a protection order. He's still in my jail awaiting trial with a bail that has been substantially increased. I'm anticipating prison time for him, but only time will tell. Third was a city police officer. I'm a county deputy sheriff, because we received a call from a 6-year-old that his dad was in the garage doing drugs and wouldn't come out. Showed up to find 4 very young kids running around unsupervised. It was a city police officer smoking meth that he had confiscated during a traffic stop and not reported or turned into evidence. DCI took the case from us due to potential conflict of interest and have placed him in another county's jail, and I haven't heard any more about it. Hope he does time too. What kind of butthole leaves his little kids totally alone and unsupervised while they smoke meth? Especially when said person is a effing cop. Unforgivable in my opinion. But yeah. 2020 has been a very strange year for me. Wow, very similar thing happened to a judge in Nashville too. He even went so far as to make a call to let a personal acquaintance out of holding, who then went back to the wife who reported him and almost beat her to death. Wow. I'm from Nashville. I never heard of this. Because after he posted bail on the first one he was spotted lurking outside her home only 45 minutes after being released. Probably prevented her from being murdered. The most common time an abusive partner murders his girlfriend is right after she's called the cops on him. Important advice: if you've reported your partner to the police, and you're getting a police escort home to collect your things, stay with the escort. Going through a late orange and not waiting for your escort to catch up ended up with one of my brother's friends with a dad in jail and a mom in heaven. Late orange equals yellow light that changed. Thanks for clarifying this. Damn. Holy F. Strangulation in domestic violence specifically is a very potent predictor of future murder. So, yep. Do you have any sources for this? I ask because my sister was just strangled by her boyfriend and has now forgiven him. He told the prosecutor she doesn't want him to go to jail and she wants contact. I'm hoping he goes away for a long time. He's out on bail now with only electronic contact allowed. If I could find some solid evidence, maybe I could save her life. Otherwise, there is no talking any sense into her. Sharing comment from user: Estrogen Island victims who have been choked once are 750% more likely to be killed by their abusers, and that choking is considered a strong predictor of homicide. Web link. Reddit link. Thank you. This page lays it out, with links to sources. Unfortunately, it can be really hard to get someone to accept a truth they're not ready to hear. I hope your words get through. Web link. Former prosecutor here. I too have prosecuted a defense attorney coercing sex from defendants and defendants' wives. I had no idea this happened before that case and am disgusted about it to this day. I still think about it all the time. Thank you for arresting this guy. Yeah, a lot of folks who don't work in our field have no idea how disgusting it really is. A defense attorney using his position to coerce anything out of his clients, let alone sex, is a complete and total perversion of justice. Public defenders are supposed to be there to make sure their client doesn't get abused by the system and has a fair day in court. It makes me unspeakably angry because it was my job to bring him clients. Absolutely sickening. I'm still infuriated he managed to plea it all down to no prison time. Only solace in the situation is that he's been debarred and definitely won't practice again. I'm glad you've arrested them, though. It has to be disheartening, but please remember that the rest of us citizens need you to have the same standards for all humans, regardless of the color of their work clothing. By arresting the officers who are not following the law, it increases the faith that us civilians have in law enforcement. So, thank you. Thank you for watching. If you like our videos, please like them on YouTube. And share them with your friends. Please subscribe to be the first to know about Red Rabbit Reader's new videos. We welcome your comments below. Another of our videos will begin shortly.